Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Craig Hyman. Looking forward to our conversation today, Craig.
Yeah, hi, Simon. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah.
I'm honored that you would want me on the show, and I'm also looking forward to our chat. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and listeners, Craig's got some problems going on with his back, and I said, like, do you want to just postpone it till you're feeling it? He said, no, we've got to do it now. So let's get on and crack it. This guy has an incredible work appetite. He's telling me he gets between 3 to 500 emails a day, and he's got to respond to about two thirds of them. So this guy is a worker, right? This is a volume guy. So hopefully the hour, as I said to Craig, hopefully this hour should be a little bit of respite from emails and that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, I look forward to that.
the first question really for you, Craig, is to what extent does this word healing resonate with you?
Right. Well, the word healing resonates with me greatly, I would say, incredibly so. Um, it's as an adoptee, a reunited adoptee of foster care, 10 months of foster care at the beginning of my life, person. Um, it's always been, and it's if my life is one long football game, and from the very beginning, like, since I can remember, and the goal of the game is to is healing. It primarily from the primal wound, which those of you who don't know is, well, you probably do, but primal wound, separation anxiety, so on and so forth, as well as the issues from my dysfunctional family in that order. So part of the problem is that the game never really ends. You can arrive at certain benchmarks in your process and in time, and I feel like I'm probably as far along as I'm going to get in my healing, but it's a lifelong occupation, if you will. So I don't see it ever ending, but I'm certainly a lot farther along than I was. But healing, yeah, healing's sort of the goal in life for someone like me. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And what does it mean? What does it mean to you?
well, to me, healing means a few things, as it applies to me personally. I can't speak for others, but um, I think number one would be understanding exactly what is happening with me when my adoption issues and complexities arise, sorry, and having the tools and the insights to know what to do with them when they arise. I will give you a quick sort of story. I'm a fan of Ram Dass, who I was fortunate enough um, to know and take his retreats and so on and so forth. And what he talks about is, somebody asked him in the retreat I was in. They said, "Well, after all the work that you've done on yourself, and this he's a Harvard psychology PhD and has written multiple books. So, after all the work you've done on yourself, Ram Dass, do you feel that you've gotten out from under your issues?" He says, "No," he says, nothing has changed. He said, basically, now when they come up, all I do is I invite them in. I said, "Hey, how are you? Good to see you again. Come have a seat, sit down." And just sort of being with them, he would say, allows them to go away much more quickly. So it's sort of just a way of maybe working through it just by allowing it rather than fighting it.
Yeah.
I would say it also means, to me, it means an ease of weight, like a weight, like lightening of a load of sadness, depression, helplessness that I feel I've carried around since birth, since I can remember. Um, again, the primal wound. So it allows me to feel, um, healing allows me to feel happier and more peaceful and serene. During the process and also arriving at certain benchmarks, as I said.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've heard Ram Dass speak a bit. I mean, was he a, was he really big in the 60s and the 70s, or because
Yes,
yeah,
huge. I mean, he was in Harvard with Timothy Leary, and they started out doing the LSD experiments with prisoners who had no remorse for having killed people and raped people and no understanding how that can affect others. And through bringing the time the drug was legal, bringing this drug into this setting and allowing them to take it was allowing them to leave their psyche or their perspective and see themselves differently and how what they have done could be wrong or how it hurt others or others that were attached to those that they maybe murdered. Um, and then he started bringing students in on the experiments, and then the faculty, of course, didn't like that. And then he and then they declared LSD illegal, and then he and Timothy Leary, were both fired from Harvard. And the interesting thing about those two is Timothy Leary is pure science. Like he doesn't, Ram Dass used to say that he said, Leary, that is, that Leary would say, I don't have a spiritual bone in my body. Whereas Ram Dass replaced, he wanted to, he is a completely spiritual, as we know. He wanted to stay at these levels, these psychological highs from the LSD, but they kept wearing off. So he went to India and where he found his guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And what he did is he discovered meditation in such a deep way that it allowed him these sort of, for lack of a better word, intoxicated conscious states organically, and that was his pathway for many, many years to follow. And he wrote about it, so on and so forth.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the inviting them in, it's a whole new relationship with trauma, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be there no matter what we do. So, I think generally speaking, our initial response when something uncomfortable comes up, whether it be physical or mental or whatever, is to push it away or try to fix it or get away from it as quickly as possible because it doesn't feel good. It feels bad. And yeah, makes perfect sense. But the psychological stuff, and when you're an adoptee, you're carrying around trauma in your body, you're carrying around trauma in the cells of your body, in your mind, your subconscious. It's everywhere. It's part of your fiber. So it's going to keep coming up. And yes, can push it away, or yes, you could take a drink to try to mask it, or yes, you can act out and yelling at somebody else for how you feel. But the reality is, finding ways, coping mechanisms, to just allow it to be and no, being able to know what it is half the battle. And you know what it is, you know it won't last forever, and you know it won't kill you, although it feels like it may. And then you sit with it, maybe meditate, maybe go running. I don't know. You just let it be, and then it does leave eventually. Um, I hope that all makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, it does. I mean, as regular listeners might know, I mentioned it. I've been mentioning it a few times. I've been doing some somatic experiencing recently,
Very
and
powerful.
very powerful. And I'm going to see her again tomorrow, actually. So I've been going every month for maybe 4 or 5 months, I think, something like that. Just see her every month. Um, and the last session was particularly powerful, and it was visceral. Well, inviting them in. The word that occurred to me at the time was very similar, but it was actually embracing them, right? And we bring them in so close, they actually form part of us. They bring them in so close, and there's no distinction between us and the feeling, and also there's no definition of the feeling,
Right. That's
right?
very important. Sorry to interrupt, but what you just said to me is so very important. Um, the fact that our primal wound and 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 who we are, they are the same thing. We are one and the same, um, because that's how we were born into the world that way. So
Well, but wouldn't that what would Ram Dass say about that though? Wouldn't he say that we're not our body, that we're spirit, we're the ghost in the machine? And wouldn't he say
he
that?
would
I don't
say
know.
that. He would say that, the physical form is just a package. So, but it is connected to the mind. So I guess we can not argue, but talk about it from both sides of the street. The fact that we are not our bodies. That's just a package to contain our souls through this journey in this lifetime. But at the same time, it's sort of like the primal wound is so deep in our cellular memory. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I know it is for me. So in that sense, it's one and the same. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry to
that's
cut you off.
no, no. This is a dialogue, and this is where we're going to, right? So I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And the last somatic experiencing session was proof for me of that. I I had this theory a few weeks ago that because I can't remember the relinquishment, in what do they call it? The explicit memory in my cognitive memory. It's implicit, right? So it's within um it's cellular, as you so aptly put it. Um, because I can't remember it, I was thinking I haven't got a mental picture of losing my birth mum. I was thinking that my mind might overestimate it, right? Might
Mm.
overcook, might be overcooking it, right? Because I feel that I've got quite a creative, fast flowing mind, right? And I'm thinking, so my mind could be overcooking it, could be overemphasizing it. And what I realized actually in the somatic experiment is that I've been underestimating it, right? I've been underestimating it. And I had
And
this
that's brilliant for you to realize it could go either way with someone like us.
it can go either way. And it's cellular. And I say this quite a lot at the moment, right? So the healing question, on one level, psychologically, we may be healing forever, right? So I'm in agreement with you on that. We're going to be healing forever. And I think it's happening on at least two levels. So if we I look at healing from two levels. On one level, we'll be healing psychologically forever. And on another level, the essence of who we truly are is untouched by the trauma, which would be kind of, I would, having heard Ramdas a few times, that's why I thought he would see it like that. So the so but I didn't see that separation. I didn't see this multi-layered aspect to healing until last year. That was a big insight for me because I was coming at it from fully the kind of like the unwounded essence, and
Mm.
and people were saying a lot. Well, some people were saying, "Yeah, I get it, Simon," but other people were sort of slightly uh, they're scratching their heads, if not actually, but looking at it. And and but given that this untouched essence, what Richard Schwartz of IFS mentioned him a lot on the podcast at the moment, that uppercase S self that's untouched. That's the hope. That's where my hope is. That's where my hope is. And that uppercase S self, that's where I think all our clarity on identity is, right? That's our clarity and identity. And this, you've been interviewing lots of IFS experts and therapists, sorry, IFS experts recently who are also adoptees. And the trauma is in our parts, you know, the trauma is in our parts. So the little easiest one is, 5-week-old Simon that doesn't know where his mum's gone. Like we all have these different parts. Um, and our essential S, uppercase S self, is the unwoundable essence. And so,
Yeah, well put. Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how I see it now. I'm sure I'll see it differently as we go on, and that's the genius of interviewing all these different people, right? You can like we're looking at their perspectives. We're looking at their perspective. I'm interviewing them around their shifts in perspective. You've used two words, right? You used the word insight and tools. Well, I guess you started with understanding, right? Understanding, sensing what's going on. Having our antennae up, like being aware of what's going on. Yeah,
Radar. Yeah.
being aware. So there's an understanding piece, awareness piece. Then there's this insights piece, and you also talked about tools as well. So, let me go for the insights bit first. So, what's your perhaps certain moments might come to mind, or certain insights might come to mind, or what's the most important thing for you around that insight stuff in terms of sharing it with the listeners?
So when you say insight, um, can you elaborate or be a little more specific? So I'm responding to the right thing, going down the right
Okay.
um, path.
So, by an insight, I mean, in this sense, I mean a whole, but I might, well, there's insights have different levels, right? So it's a new thought or a changed thought. That's how that's how I define insights. It's a new thought. It's a new thought. It's a changed thought, or it's a change in our belief. Now, and the other thing that's really important for me in terms of insight is how powerful they are. Okay, so we might have like a new idea might just pop into our head, but like doing the somatic experiencing, it's like a whole body insight, right? I'm on the back of that. I connected 4 losses in my life
Hmm.
back to the loss of my birth mum. It was a whole body insight. It wasn't just um, oh, that's a nice topic to talk about on the podcast. or that's a nice new idea. It's got depth, it's got profundity, and it comes it comes with a load of emotion, and it's a shit. So another way would be describing an insight would be a shift, a fundamental shift in our perspective, with that comes with an emotional charge.
Well, I think for me, I think you mentioned how for you there were four significant ones. For me, I think it's been ongoing throughout life, and they just sort of keep coming up. Everyone uses the sort of analogy of the onion skin. You just keep peeling it back, and you never quite get to the end of it. But I think I'm also a highly sensitive person. I don't know how many, if people don't know what that is, they should just Google highly sensitive person or HSP, which is actually a personality trait. And I think 20% of the US population have that trait. Um, so there were two significant moments in my life related to adoption. The first one was when I read Nancy Verrier's Primal Wound when it was presented as a paper before it was a book to the AAC. I'm gonna say that was around 89, 90. Now I had been in reunion. I was reunited with everybody in my biological world, families, both parents, in 1987 after an 11-month search. This is pre-internet. And reunion was rough. But it was a couple years later that a birth mother friend of mine gave me The Primal Wound as a paper, and I read it, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't crazy. I felt like this is explaining to me what happened to me, why I am the way I am, why I have some of the issues and the challenges that I do, and how they were formed. Um, and because, I was left, I mean, I've been in therapy since I'm 9. I'm approaching 66. Fortunately, I love therapy and enjoy the process because I couldn't live without it. And there have been breaks over time, but it's been pretty consistent. Um, the the primal wound, yeah. So we formulate when we don't know about ourselves or we don't know what's going on. I don't know, fantasize is the right word, but we use whatever set we have to try to figure out and put into perspective what's going on with us, and from that draw conclusions. But the reality was that my set was too limited and did not have any of the right information until I read that paper, and that changed my life. And then when it became a book, I was ecstatic. And I've read her other books. I did a couple of sessions in therapy with Nancy. I've known Nancy for a long time. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but I've known her, yeah, for years. She's a godsend for us adoptees. But so that was the beginning, and then there was the first time I read The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. That was a second time when I felt like, geez, I'm not crazy, and explained exactly why my life was the way it was and how I was reacting and responding to things and so on and so forth. And those two books changed my life. They were the most important things I had ever read. Um, but sort of sticking to the adoption stuff, um, there were therapy, very helpful. I was in an therapy, a spiritual art therapy process for 4.5 years in Berkeley, California. And I've done pretty much every type of therapy there is. And that was the most profound and most healing of any. And a lot of it when I had a seminar, which I still have, I'm not active with it right now, called Inside Out, the Expressive Arts Adoption Healing seminar. It's an 8 hour intensive with a half-hour lunch break where we do various exercises, all things that I found to be the most healing for me. And I extracted them, put them in a sort of a form that built one upon each other um, throughout the day that has been seemed to help a lot of people and help me in the process of just helping others around this issue. But the art therapy process, there was a particular time when what we used to do is I would draw something from, because the drawing comes from subconscious, and then we divide it in quarters, and then we pick one, and then I go into it, and then I close my eyes and I meditate. I just let it take me where it takes me. And we did one around the primal wound, and I was able to come to a place where I could see my primal wound, what it looked like. And it was a very sad little, it looked like a tadpole at the bottom of sort of an ocean cave. Um, just very sad, all alone. And there's much more to it than that, but that was the first time I was ever able to like really identify it with an image and so on and so forth. And we spent time with it, and she walked me through, talked me through various things until I came out of it later, which may have been like 45 minutes or an hour. And that 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 lightened my load. That eased a lot. That helped me towards healing that wound by identifying it and being with it and seeing it and knowing that it's me, it's a part of me, and that was a life-altering moment. I found that the art therapy process has been more powerful than most anything else I've done around the
Yeah.
adoption.
Have you got a handle on why that might be, that it's the most powerful?
Because I think what happens is most of the work you do is you're operating from a subconscious place, so your filters can't get in the way. You know, when you're talking to a therapist, for example, sometimes you hold things back. Sometimes you only want to say so much of a story or a situation. Um, Art therapy, it's kind of like you move yourself out of the way because she would say, let's do a drawing. And when we draw and create art, we think we know what our intention is, and sometimes we get that out if we want to copy a photograph in a painting or something. But the reality is, it's coming from a subconscious place. So what the subconscious wants to express, it puts out on the paper, and then spending time with that, it allows you to go inside the subconscious where you're bypassing again all the filters because it's almost as if you have nothing to do with it. You're just like the vehicle that this process and this subconscious um, thing is using to take the ride on.
Yeah.
And that's a little
Beautiful.
far-reaching, but I mean that's
Yeah.
really how I feel.
Yeah. Um, I heard a great phrase today, listening to a podcast or an audio book. I can't remember which one it was. And um, and it was the body is our subconscious mind. And I thought,
Agreed. Well, that's
that
that's
is
the same thing
huge,
as
isn't it?
cellular memory. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
cut you
no,
off.
no, but that's it. But the body is the subconscious mind. I've heard a lot recently at the fact that subconscious is essentially what we don't have words for.
Hmm.
So people talk about pre-verbal trauma and adoption being pre-verbal trauma. So that was the message I kept on hearing again and again from adoptee therapists on the show last year, right? Pre-verbal trauma, pre-verbal trauma, pre-verbal. They were mentioning it, like, and I thought, well, I haven't. Maybe it's time for me to go back in and because I do an awful lot of listening to audiobooks, an awful lot of listening to podcasts around this area, around the consciousness area. But I don't do any. I'm not doing any actual therapy on it. I thought, and if it's pre-verbal, I need to do. So that's why I kind of started. I started looking at what I did because, but the idea that subconscious is and the non-verbal are one and the same, that clarifies things for me a lot because we talk about this idea all the time, don't we? Me too, right? I've stuffed my, I've stuffed my trauma so far down below. Now, are we doing that? I mean, are we choosing it? It's a really tricky one for me to to digest, to get to a truth on. But if somebody says, well, subconscious and non-verbal are the same, you can start to think, yeah, okay, I get this because non-verbal, pre-verbal, we don't have words for it, and and for how long of people being uh, doing verbal therapy, doing talk therapy for something that isn't that for trauma that's pre-verbal. No wonder it's not. No wonder. Let's say no wonder it's so tricky. No wonder it's so challenging. No wonder that. Let's look at it from from what you just shared. No wonder uh, a um, a therapy that has got nothing to do with the mind, something that looks at pre-verbal, subconscious, cellular memory, trauma. No wonder that art therapy, especially spiritual art therapy, we're going beyond the body, we're going beyond that we're going to the deep stuff, and it's a different way of accessing parts of us that Ramdas and Timothy Leary were doing with LSD, right? It's just a different, it's a different route to no mind, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're hitting it right on the head or on the nose, so to speak. You know, pre-verbal and what did you say? Pre-verbal and trauma?
Yeah,
So,
pre-verbal
yeah,
trauma.
same. It's the same thing. So, I mean, like for example, you know, the most unnatural act in the world is to separate a child from their biological mother, right? So that's a trauma. And then being an infant, a newborn, you have no template experiences in life except that which you were absorbing in the womb through your birth mother's life experiences. And back in the day, and in my situation, my birth mother was sent off to an unwed mother's home alone, 17 years old, depressed, sad. The only outlet she had was she used to play piano and sing on Saturday night for the other unwed mothers, which I have reactions to. Like I can start crying. I did this all my life until I realized in therapy what was happening maybe 8, 10 years ago. So when I would hear something like a Carole King, a Laura Nyro, a Ricky Lee Jones, my birth mother sounded like that. Um, and I would start to cry. I didn't know why. Um, but anyway, so we have no template experience. We're ripped from the only source of literally everything in our world, in our set, everything. And we can't speak, we can't express anything. All we can do is cry. And my feeling is that we just not only experience but become nothing but terror. Like we are just completely terrified. We are in our most vulnerable states, as an infant, pre-verbal, pre-everything. And all we do is internalize this trauma, this shock. I'm of the mindset that the quicker, there are two types of bonding. I'm sure you know, there's the biological mother and then the adoptive mother. And the shorter the gap between the two, although they're not the same, they're very different. They're both very important and profound. The shorter the gap between the two, the better for the child, the infant, the adoptee. In my case, I was stuck in a foster
Foster
home for
care,
10
yeah, for 10 months, yeah.
because my birth mother wouldn't sign the papers after 3 weeks, and then after 10 months, 11 months, she finally did. I don't know exactly what happened in the foster home. I can't find the foster home. I had a lead once. I may have talked to the son of the woman who fostered me, but I don't know for a fact that it was there. But but there was abuse, and there's some trauma from that as well. Um, but to have three mothers by the time you're 11 months old, um, that presents a whole nother bag of issues. So, yeah, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, and it's a complicated, lifelong experience digging out from under that stuff. Um, but yeah, that's yeah, my thoughts on that. So,
Yeah. What do you think gets in the way of our healing?
of healing, um, well, I think first and foremost is a lack of understanding what is actually going on with us. For me, it was especially as a child and a teenager, my adopted parents, my teachers, society in general, they had no idea what was going on with me, what I was reacting to and behaving out of what place for what reasons. Um, so basically, they were telling me not to be something in a certain way and someone that I was being that was as a result of this trauma and this abuse in foster care and what have you. And they didn't even know that they were responding to the wrong things. Um,
Because
so
you were born what, fifth, were you born 59, 58, 59?
58, November
58.
58.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you talked about you reading the Primal Wound as a paper back in 89 stroke 90, and the book came out like 93, I think.
Yeah. I
So
read it as a,
nobody, sorry.
it was only 30 pages when I first read it because it was
Oh,
presented as a paper to the
wow.
American Adoption Congress. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no. But so nobody knew, right?
No, so this is a great, great problem in society. I mean, this is been changing slowly over the years, but I feel that it's one of my obligation. I don't know if calling is the right word, obligations to, my God, my higher power, my universe, more important than anything other adoptees, and to educate society in general about the things we're talking about here today. Like people walk around thinking, even still, well, a child needs a family and a parent, which it does. A parent family wants another child, okay, and it's you put them together and it's happy ever after. Well, it certainly can help, but there's a lot more to it than that, and people don't know this.
Mm.
And so you're getting all these, they're telling you don't be this way, don't be that way, don't respond like this, don't respond like that, don't act this way. And it's kind of like they think I'm doing it because of reasons that are completely unrelated and disconnected from the real reasons I'm doing it. So my thing about adoptive parents is, sometimes I do mentoring and coaching, and people seek my the information that I'm talking about now is I think it's more important than anything to know, in as much as it's possible, what the infant has been through before you adopt them, which will help you then address not only those things, but everything about that child as they grow in life. Because, like, for me, as an example, my parents meant well. They sat me down with the Chosen Baby story book, um, which my dear friend and mentor BJ Lifton years later was asked to rewrite, update. And they would sit me down once a week and explain what happened to me, and so on and so forth. So, but this is all they had. This is what the agency told them to do, Spence Chapin in New York. And so they did it. But they didn't have enough information. They didn't have enough tools. That's not going to fix much. So that's
Yeah,
that's what I'm referring to.
yeah. Do any any more external barriers to our healing come to mind, or any internal barriers? Because clearly, this wider societal ignorance, right? That is, as we're growing up, given the lack of power that we have,
Yeah.
the environment's going to clearly plays a big part. But any other external barriers or any kind of like internal barriers to healing come to mind?
Well, yeah. So therapy is to me really important. Preferably somebody who understands something about adoption, at least something. Um, But, finding now those people are more available than they used to be. Finding that person, the right person, then affording that if your insurance isn't covering it. Um, I remember during yeah, right after my reunion, um, I mean, it was a dam burst. And that's a whole nother
Yeah,
conversation for next time. But I remember going from therapist to therapist and paying them, and none of them knew what I was talking about. And they were taking notes, and I was educating them. And I was the one I was really suffering. I mean, very severely suffering. And so not either having the ability or affordability or access to right therapy, um, not knowing about resources, support groups, most importantly, which I think was really kept my sanity in check and was healing, was finding the community. And mostly it was through the male adoptee group that I ran for years, that I created out of need to be around other adoptees, A, that experienced what I experienced, so we can help each other sort through it, and B, validation, big one, validation, and stuff that was more specific towards males as opposed to female adoptees. There is not 100%, but quite a difference.
yeah,
Um, so, you know, and I guess sometimes in terms of what might have blocked um, these sort of overwhelming issues, might be, let's see, sometimes the pain and the feelings that this is sort of unintentionally a self-inflicted block. The pain and the issues and the confusion is so deep and so t intense that it's just so painful and uncomfortable to go there that it has to sometimes it blocks the process. It has to be in small bites, so to speak, sometimes small little increments. Um, yeah, and I think, it's also very important to have a healing, supportive environment, whether it be friends, families, lover, partner, what have you. Because if anyone's giving you the wrong message and they're not supporting what you're going through, they don't have to understand it. They just have to accept that this is what you need and that they need to be supportive of it. That can be a killer. Like that can really work in the reverse direction of where you want to go.
Yeah, yeah. I'm conscious of time, um, Craig. Is there anything you'd like to share that that I've not asked you about?
Um, Let me think for a moment. I think your questions were covered a lot and really the most important things, and it was sort of a great umbrella um, um, approach. I think for me, what's just really important is to have a support system, but I think we really have a responsibility to educate society about what adoption is and what it's like for us and what would help us and what adoptive parents are getting into exactly and how to help the child. Um, there aren't a ton of forums around. In other words, like this, by this point in our society, this should be common knowledge. Like people should know this stuff, right? They've been adopting kids for God knows how long. And it seems to be a small minority, and mostly in terms of if you're not an adoptee or a birth parent, it's only the adoptive parents who are seeking to adopt a child that go down the path of trying to get more information and oftentimes are met with this information which isn't what they were looking for. They were just looking for what do we need to know and how do we do this? And it's like, oh, the kid had a trauma? Geez, So I think somehow, I mean, I've seen it done in films and I saw a great film a year or two ago. It was to me there were four or five really well done adoption films. I'm not talking about all the little documentaries that people do that are adoptees and stuff, birth parents, but the one was Return to Seoul, as in Seoul, South Korea. I don't know if you saw it, but
No.
I think to me it was the best film on adoption ever because what it did was tell this girl's story about searching for a birth mother, but it also allowed room for character development because, pardon my French, a lot of crap goes on over time, which can seem like an eternity when you're an adoptee. These different stages of growth and pain, and it seems to never go away. Most of the other films, although fantastic, like Secrets and Lies by Mike Lee and Philomena and The Lion, I think it was called, and stuff like that. Great, great films, great adoption stories. But they kind of jump from here's an adoptee, he's adopted, and then here he is a drug addict because he can't cope with life, or it's genetic from he inherited from a parent, and then he kills himself or something ridiculous like that. Whereas this film, Return to Soul, they allowed all this room for character development. So there was a big part in the middle of the film where they showed her go through different stages of growth, of pain, of realization and transformation, which is, I think, key. But so just to I got off on a tangent there, but just to reel it back in, I just
Yeah.
think it's important the education
Education.
um,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this in society.
Totally. And the other question that popped into my head a little bit earlier on, because you're obviously talking about Ramdas, I was wondering who do you uh, who do you listen to now, or whose books do you read now, or do you prefer the more kind of the cinema and the films? Is that when what's helping you at the moment? What's inspiring you at the moment?
That's a good question. Um, so I both. I like both. I mean, I love going to the cinema. I'm a big film person. I used to be a film producer. Um, but it, the books, I often reread the same books that I highlight for years. Occasionally there's a new one introduced, but the books that I read that I lean on are Wayne Dyer, um, Ram Dass, of course, the Primal Wound stuff by Nancy Verrier. There's a guy named Leo Buscaglia, a book in particular, Living, Loving, and Learning. Um, I
Yeah,
kind of keep them in stacks around my bedside.
cool.
Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're sort of they're psychological in nature, but they're also spiritual. And the combination of the two, I find for me personally most helpful and rewarding because I relate to that. And
Yeah,
there are two sides of us, those two sides of us, which always to me need work and help. So
yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Craig.
the pleasure is mine. Thank
Yeah.
you for having me. And thank you
Well,
for doing this important work, your
yeah.
podcast.
I'm the work reaching outside the world of adoptee world is kind of is more on my mind at the moment. I'm I'm doing more. I've got a concerted effort to build more relationships with adoption agencies to get involved in both pre and post adoption, right? So that's kind of my main focus. But there's another kind of like sort of podcast, and then the speaking bit, and then the third bit that's a distant third is the education piece outside that piece, and I'm trying to think of how I can do that and how I can support others doing that, right? So it's not just it's not just about me, we're trying to lift everybody up. So that
Right.
was uh, that was great. Thanks a lot. Oh, one last question. I haven't asked this for a while. Um, But does anything come to mind in terms of what this episode of the podcast could be called? A title for the podcast?
Uh, well, there's a book. I forgot who wrote it. I think it's three therapists on adoption. I think it's called The Lifelong Journey to Self. Something like that. I also I'm a big believer in pre and perinatal psychology. There's a book called Babies Remember Birth by a Dr. Chamberlain, which I'm really big on, but that's not answering your question. I
Yeah.
forgot to mention that. Well, something along the lines of, um, with these concepts, like there's hope. It's not easy. It's a lifelong journey. Education. I, I'll have to leave it to you to come up with something.
Well,
And
the one that had come from me was, the bit of the piece from your words, right? So taking your words rather than coming up with my own was lightening the load.
hmm, Okay, that works. It's a good
That
title.
yeah, that's a good time. Cool.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, listeners. Thanks, Craig. And we'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, Simon. Be well.